Hey soldiers, there's legal action afoot that may reduce the price of investment real estate, may also reduce the price of a primary residence. If it happens, it will definitely reduce the amount of quality representation you can get to go through this complex and very, very expensive transaction. In addition, professionals in the business, you realtors out there, you realtists, listen up. You may be about to lose 66% of your compensation, thanks to these private lawsuits that are class action, and thanks to now the Department of Justice looking into this entire compensation model for real estate agents. Now, look, let me preface this. We're going to get into it, and we're going to offer some things that real estate agents may want to think about. We're also going to talk about how this is going to look for the home buyer and seller, because don't rejoice. You know, the government giveth with one hand and they taketh away with another. So we're going to get into those solutions and explain it to you in deeper detail. But understand, I used to be a lobbyist. Many of you soldiers already know this. Used to be a lobbyist in the telecommunications industry for Verizon. And studying the history of that whole industry, I can tell you back in 1984, before I came onto the scene in terms of professionally, okay? But I've studied the history. Back in 1984, we saw Judge Harold Green, federal Judge Harold Green, break up AT&T. It was called divestiture. At one point, AT&T was just a behemoth company. It controlled long distance, which is a thing of the past. It controlled local telephone service, which is also, nobody thinks about that anymore. But he broke that company up into 7 what were called regional bells. He totally disrupted the industry. At the same time, that decision, no one saw it then, but created a lot of opportunity, especially after more legislation came into effect with the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Now, do I think it'll work like that in real estate sales? No, because telecommunications is an essential service. And it had a lot to do with the government, so they were heavily involved. I think if the government gets its way, and if these private lawsuits, these class action lawsuits get their way, all you're going to see is just a tremendous reduction in the compensation model for real estate agents, all right? They're going to go from, as we'll see, 6%, so 3% for one side, 3% for the other, optimally. Doesn't always work out that way. To 2%. So 1% for buyer, 1% for seller's agent. Okay. So that is what is kind of what they're aiming at right now, to put us on par with other Western countries like the UK, Australia, and Canada. All right. So the difference in commission, that's what's being questioned here, thanks to all of these suits. And just to let you know, once the Department of Justice gets involved, stuff takes on a life of its own, okay? And personally, I don't think the National Association of Realtors is up for this kind of fight. The money-making real estate commission system, where brokers pocket as much as 6% of a sale and critics charge inflates home prices, could face a federal antitrust probe after years-long investigations. People with the matter told Bloomberg. Now, it's important to keep in mind that 6%, although you may see it characterized as something that is static, immovable, this is what it is, nothing could be further from the truth. It is completely negotiable. They don't have just this set rule that the seller's agents are going to pay 6%. That is not true. So if you see that written somewhere in the media, understand they don't know what they're talking about. The reported scrutiny by the Justice Department comes amid 2 private class action lawsuits that look to loosen the stranglehold the powerful National Association of Realtors has over the residential housing market. I take issue with that word stranglehold, because you can sell your house yourself. You can do a for sale by owner. You can also have a lawyer do it. All right. And many states have the lawyer prominent in that transaction. And some would argue, well, if I try to do it, I don't have access to the multiple list service. There are plenty of services out there at this point that will give you that access as a seller. So things have changed. It is not monopolistic from my point of view. The National Association of Realtors, which is a trade and lobbying group, which most real estate brokerages are required to join, that's changing too, controls many of the country's multiple list services, an essential industry tool that aggregates properties available for sale in a given region. Now listen up. Redfin, and there are several other brokerages that have recently disassociated with the National Association of Realtors and said, you know what, we're not going to require our agents to be a part of that. Would you? When they're doing just such a poor job in terms of representing their own industry. All right, the Justice Department has turned its focus to the real estate commission sharing system that bakes in a 5 to 6% cut of the sale. Again, that is not static and immovable. This 5 to 6% or whatever it is, okay, is split between the sellers and buyers agents according to Bloomberg. Now listen, let's say they come up with 5%. The way they've characterized it here, the buyer's agent gets 2.5%, the seller's agent gets 2.5%. That's not true either in all cases. That could happen, but it's not necessary for it to happen. Those two agents, those two brokerages can decide how they want to split that up based on what they want to do in terms of helping that property sell. The system, which is largely unique to the U.S., pushes up the overall price of homes, according to critics. In Australia and the U.K., total commissions on a home sale are roughly 2%, Bloomberg reported. Now, listen up. Realtors are due compensation if you get representation from an attorney, if you go to a doctor, okay, if, you walk into a 7-Eleven and you want to buy a Coca-Cola, you have to pay for it, all right? You get what you pay for. So if it was free, do you really want it? Okay, what you're going to see is a lot of professionals in the business say, I'm gone, I'm out, I got to do something else. I can't work for 1%. Because remember, if they do this and get it to 2% here in America, that would mean the buyer side gets 1% and the seller side gets 1%. I'm going to tell you right now, this would result in an exodus from that industry and a decline in the quality of representation. Now, I don't know who you know. You might have got a bad realtor, okay? Just like sometimes you get a bad doctor, or plenty of people are sitting in prison today for crimes they didn't commit because they had a bad lawyer. So yeah, real estate agents are a microcosm of the society. I tend not to prejudge whole groups of people on the performance or behaviors of, a few. So that's just me. The difference in commission price cost a U.S. seller listing their home for $416,100, which is the median price of a home in the United States, about $14,000 more than it does in other countries. Okay, so what? There's a lot of things that cost more or less in this country than they do in other countries. So I'm not sure what standard we're trying to meet here. And then there's also different rules around property ownership in the three countries mentioned, UK, Australia, and Canada, that look a lot different than the way they look here. I mean, hell, Canada's a vast wilderness by and large, right? So is Australia. And Great Britain's a little teeny island. Look, I'm not castigating these countries. I'm just saying there are differences. And someone from the UK can weigh in on this. There's land that, belongs to the crown that you can't own. They own it. So there are some nuances there, okay? The Justice Department, quote, is concerned about policies, practices, and rules in the residential real estate industry that may increase broker commissions, unquote. The agency said in a recent court filing asking a federal judge in Boston to delay her decision 2 months on a potential settlement in a separate antitrust suit challenging these commission rules. Meanwhile, a class action lawsuit in Missouri that began Monday is seeking as much as $4 billion in damages from the so-called, quote, participation rule, unquote, in the commission sharing system. A group of Missouri home sellers brought the suit to Kansas City District Court, arguing that the long-standing process by which residential real estate is sold is anti-competitive. Realtors, I'm telling you something, you better listen up to that word. You can protest all you want, but you do not have the type of lobbyists working on your behalf that are equipped to beat that charge back. Trust me, I've met these people, okay? Tweed jacket, rubber chicken eating, guys that go around simply to get a free dinner at some conference, that type set, all right? There are different stratifications and calibers of advocates, industry advocates, okay? And I'm going to tell you, guys, I'm always honest with you. I just don't have faith in the National Association of Realtors in terms of their representation of their own industry. All right, so they're saying that the real estate sold is anti-competitive because it requires sellers to list their homes on a multiple listing service where they have to agree to a predetermined commission. Now, a lot of that is incorrect. Yeah, you want your home on that multiple listing service because you know that there are a lot of professionals looking at that, trying to match up their buyers with folk that are selling. I think that's a good thing, right? And again, that is compensable. Also, this is not required in the sense that you are not required to have a realtor or a realtist, a real estate agent, represent you. It's just a tool that they use. The MLS is the tool they use to help get the word out that you're selling your house. It's not required. The fee, typically 6%, is effectively non-negotiable. Not true. We addressed that earlier. That 6% is completely negotiable. The commission sharing structure equates to collusion. We've heard that a lot in the last few years, haven't we? According to Michael Ketchmark, the lead plaintiff's attorney in the Missouri case, the day of accountability is coming. That's a quote from Ketchmark. Very ominous quote, right? Because he's going to get a sizable cut of any settlement. So, the day of accountability is coming for him to go over to the Ferrari dealer and drive away with one. The National Association of Realtors has warned that a ruling in the plaintiff's favor could render buyers' agents unaffordable, block equal access to listings, and restrict buyer choice, the trade group's lawyer Leslie Machow told The Real Deal. What they're saying is if they shift the commission burden over onto the buyer, then buyers come to the table usually with, especially first-time buyers, without a ton of money. They get in by a hair's breadth. I know I did, all right, when I first purchased my first home. So that's another thing that may conspire to reduce the price of, reduce the commission level. Another class action lawsuit in Illinois makes similar claims and is set to go on trial early next year. The plaintiffs are seeking $40 billion in damage. That seems to be the going rate. Representatives for the National Association of Realtors and Justice Department did not immediately respond to the New York Post request for comment. The two lawsuits opened the door for the Department of Justice to file its own antitrust lawsuit. Now, if you want to understand how powerful these charges are, just ask Google, Microsoft. They've had their business models changed in many ways thanks to antitrust suits. In fact, Google's going through one right now. In the worst case scenario for the real estate industry, it could result in the ban of commission sharing, prohibiting sellers' agents from compensating buyers' agents. According to Bloomberg, the Department of Justice has reached an antitrust settlement with the National Association of Realtors during Donald Trump's administration in 2020, though it pulled out of the settlement a year later so it could proceed in investigating the association's rules and whether they harm home buyers and sellers. Okay, so they said, no, we're not going with Trump's ruling here. We're going to break out of that because, after all, Trump was a real estate agent, right? I believe he still is, and is going to be more partial to that industry that he's made a lot of money in. They are out of that. The federal agency said its withdrawal allowed it to move forward with its probe of the National Association, quote, without restriction, unquote. Realtors, look, you're going to have to add another stream of income, okay, that you can pivot to. Because I'm telling you right now, if my money's on the Justice Department, I've seen this story before. I've lived this when I was representing Verizon as a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., in several of the states, in different countries. Okay, I've seen this. So you're going to have to decide what you want to pivot to. Now, we're over here in the financial services industry. We'd love to have you, especially those of you who already know how to sell and have already built rapport and client bases and can go ahead and incorporate. Maybe you don't switch wholesale, but incorporate into a different industry, an industry where all of your clients from real estate definitely need financial services. I would argue that the real estate industry, sales, is a part of the financial services industry, given the size of the transaction and its impact on your overall financial health. So if you want more information about that, see us at info@mcenow.com. That's our email address. You can drop us a line, or just visit mcenow.com to find out what we do in this industry. We can help you take a look at it and evaluate it for your own purposes, because your industry is changing. I'm not saying that it's going away, but it's definitely changing. And if these guys have their way, it will become a lot less lucrative than it is now. You have to work a lot harder to make the same amount of money. And I'm sure that doesn't make sense to you. Now, all you folk out there who are buyers and sellers, don't rejoice over this just yet. Because as I said earlier, I think I said earlier, government giveth and the government taketh away. If they free up money from compensation models for the real estate professionals, then eventually you will realize that that money and more will be absorbed in higher ad valorem / real estate taxes on a local level. I'm telling you, these local politicians are industrious. They look at things like this and they'll say, hey, they're not paying that high commission anymore. In fact, they're paying 66% less. We got some room to maneuver. Let's increase taxes on real estate. All right, guys, more to come on this. I'll talk to you soon.